The cultural representation debate has been rekindled since the killing of George Floyd and the aftercoming growth of the Black Lives Matter movement. Also, the death of Chadwick Boseman has played a role in re-emerging this topic. The goal of this discourse has often been to normalize cultural representation, the idea that ethnic minorities but also other minorities can participate in culture should be hegemonic. However, this of course is connected to soft power structures, infrastructures and genres, and hegemony. Is there, in this debate itself, also a power dynamic? I think there is a sort of hierarchy connected to normality, the use of genre, and infrastructures in this cultural representation debate. The power dynamic determines the effect a member can have on the discourse. I will make use of three main pieces of theory when analyzing the data that I will use to prove my thesis. First of all, I want to note the emplacement. Most of the data I collected was collected online. Thus, we have to look at things like access, but also digital literacy and the filter bubble phenomenon to be able to understand the data completely. Second of all, we have to look at the adressivity. Do people understand what the message you are giving? And if so, why is that? This, of course, is an indicator of the power of the communication that certain people are using and thus the power they have. This is linked to hegemony, hegemony being the norms in a group. If you know these norms, it's easier for you to communicate and thus your adressivity goes up, and vice versa. Lastly, I will also look at genre. This is powerfully connected to emplacement, but if one uses a genre that is understandable, this shows that that genre is communicatively powerful. Moreover, I should mention that this will be a multimodal study. Video and tweets, but also other data will be used. Thus, semiotic, textual, and audiovisual data will be combined. First of all, I want to explain, before anything else, why I chose the data that I did. I chose a tweet, a YouTube video, and the comments that are there. The reason I chose this data was because a large portion of this discourse takes place online. These two things are part of the discourse and they are by sources that could reach a lot of people. It's a tweet by a famous person and a video essay that's been watched a lot. The tweet is linked to it because it says Black Lives Matter. It talks about a movie that has been hailed within the cultural representation debate called Black Panther, and it combines a lot of things. The video essay I chose because it is an example of people trying to understand what they should do and what their norms should be within the discourse, because it is a video essay. The first piece of data I will use is a tweet by Jim Carrey. He uses a couple of things that are interesting, but first let me look at what this tweet is trying to communicate. Well, it uses the hashtag Black Lives Matter, says that he is touched, and shows a African American child sitting next to his dolls, which are of the Avengers, with in the middle a fallen Black Panther, which is the character that the Chadwick Boseman that is mentioned in the tweet played. Many people saw this character as empowering, especially to African American children. Why is this communicatively powerful? Well, the most important thing here is that people have to have access and understand this. Primarily, the hashtag Black Lives Matter, the chant Chadwick Forever, which is derivative of Wakanda Forever, but also the pose that the child is doing and the characters that are in the picture, they have to be understandable to an audience. Moreover, the genre of a tweet, or even closely linked to that, kind of a meme in this case, has to be understandable to the audience. This means that these genres also have to be known by the people. All in all, we just need to have digital literacy to be able to communicate properly in this discourse. A lot of the communication that is done in this discourse happens online. Thus, one needs to be able to understand this communication to be able to participate at all. However, one actually needs to reproduce it and be creative with these things if one really wants to be effective. Another important factor is that we can see that, Black Lives Matter, which is a larger organization, but also the Marvel's things that we see in here, which is the movie studio that made the movie Black Panther, are connected to this. We see that there are institutions connected to the intertextuality that they're using. One needs to understand how things are being recontextualized and what these references mean. Thus, institutions play a powerful role, and people need to have digital literacy but also communicative literacy to be able to understand what people are using. It is a sort of repertoire. Second piece of data I'll be looking at is a YouTube video. So, first of all, this YouTube video has two parts. They, however, form one whole. So I will be treating them as if they were one large overcoupling video because they have the same genre and the same idea behind them. This video is supposed to be a video essay about whether to watch the movie Gone with the Wind that has been criticized by the cultural representation debate. First of all, you have to understand, of course, again, the genre of this video essay, but there is more to this that makes it even more obvious. The place where people have to interact with this data, again, is the internet, but more specifically YouTube. We can only access this specific part of the discourse through the internet. This is the same with the tweet, still. This requires access to the internet. They also just need to know how to use the internet. This shows that infrastructures are necessary to be part of the discourse. However, even more so here, one other thing is obvious: one needs to be in the right filter bubble. On YouTube, too much content is uploaded by too many people to be able to just find anything you want. You have to be recommended usually. Thus, the filter bubble can affect whether you see this video or not. Thus, people with interest and thus also likely knowledge about this topic and about digital literacy and stuff, they will be more likely to see this. Furthermore, to actually make videos like this, you need even more infrastructures. You need access to communications equipment. You need education to make proper videos. You need to learn how to edit. You need to learn how to use all the equipment you have to buy, which all requires infrastructures. This shows how that infrastructures are very important because, you know, the individual commenters on these videos, they can of course influence one another's opinions, but they have less impact. They are only seen by other commenters that happen to scroll by, but this video is seen by the amount of people that are watching the videos. Thus, a person with means and communications is more powerful. This is quite interesting and thus shows that there is some sort of levels. People with more means and more access to infrastructures and more education will be more likely to see it. Combine this with the filter bubble phenomenon. This makes a lot of knowledge required to properly understand, see, and produce content within this discourse. Now I will go on to the comment section under the aforementioned video. So I will divide this part up in two parts. One showing the general attitude and hegemony, and another one showing somebody breaking this hegemony and therefore facing consequences. Well, first of all, I will now show a couple of pictures and screenshots of the comment section. Very few people talk about whether slavery is bad or racism is bad. Constitutional values and equality are not really questioned. Everybody seems to agree on this. Very few people even mention it, and even less people question it. These, what some people would call liberal but really Enlightenment ideals, are hegemonic. They are universally agreed upon within this group. This matches with the theory that Enlightenment ideals after World War II became more or less hegemonic in society. They became, at least in Western society, normal. People agreed that democracy and other things were good. If one doesn't know this and one doesn't really agree with these Enlightenment ideals, one has less adressivity. One becomes an outsider because one obviously is breaking the rules. This makes it more difficult to communicate. I will now have an example of this in the next section. So now I want to talk about somebody being chastised for not following the rules of the hegemony. that I previously mentioned. Miscommunication, a lack of adressivity, these are all consequences of not following these rules. Now, the main comment we're going to be focused on is the one by RMP Suma up top, and his main point is kind of summed up in the second to last line for a lot of people, I think. Liberalism is a mental disease, and I'll be damned if I ever succumb to it, he says. As we previously said, liberalism is a term that, especially in American politics, is often associated with the Enlightenment ideals we previously mentioned. Things like anti-racism, constitutional equality. All these things are often associated with the word liberalism. So basically, RMP Suma is saying all those things that you guys find hegemonic, that you guys find normal, all these things, I'm against those things. Captain Haddock's response then kind of sums up what you'd expect. He says, you support slavery. And as we previously said, slavery is considered bad in this hegemony. So this person is supporting something bad, and then his identity becomes bad as well. He is an outsider. Then RMP Suma responds by insulting. He says, Captain Haddock is stupid and nothing can help him, and he's sad and dumb. Well, that is quite logical, because they are breaking each other's hegemony and they are insulting one. Even the guy called Conservative Catholic responds to this by saying that RMP Suma is one of the bad conservatives, and it's a problem that people still think like this, and you'd expect somebody who labels themselves conservative in America to have the same points as RMP Suma. RMP Suma then also responds in his PS by saying that, scroll down to Conservative Catholic's final comment, for sheer ignorance and for sinking to a new low. As we can see, there is just conflict here, but nobody's actually helping each other see a new point. There is no real successful communication except for conflict. RMP Suma has little to no adressivity in this comment section because he is an outsider, because he breaks the hegemony. There's less adressivity, and thus RMP Suma has less of a chance to have impact. This shows that knowledge of the hegemony and a willingness to follow is the only way to have effective communication within this discourse. In sum, we can see that there are multiple factors that determine how much power a person has to participate in the discourse. These have to do with understanding genres and how one can impact the movement. The movement largely takes place online. There's a lot of online content connected to the movement. Thus, it becomes part of online culture. Thus, to access digital resources is a very important factor. One needs access to specific physical but also educational infrastructures. This is impacted by the filter bubble phenomenon. Because hegemonic knowledge, recognizability, and access to resources all play a role in how successfully one can participate in the discourse, this means there is a certain hierarchy. People with better education, more understanding of the hegemony, more understanding of genres, and more access to better infrastructures will have more communicative power. This means there are these power structures based on conventions such as genres, usage of infrastructures and personal knowledge, and access to resources. All in all, I think I've proven that this discourse is codified by soft power, all linked to the ability to communicate effectively. Thank you for watching.